Interesting. Okay, so MP, shall we have our first reading?
Okay, so I'm just going to start from chapter 1, and just to let you get how the story starts and the setup and Chantel's background and baggage. All is fair in love and war. Sitting at her desk in the spacious office she shared with 12 others, Chantel Sarr typed out those words, the perfect title to her article for the April edition of Odopa magazine. The cursor blinked on the laptop screen as if in celebration of another job well done, well within her submission deadline. A good thing, since she still had the feature story for April on her plate, an interview with construction tycoon and notorious playboy, Lord Mackenzie. She snickered at the oddity of the name. What kind of parents named their kid Lord? None of her business. Her job consisted of conducting the interview and writing her piece. God knew she couldn't afford to have her feature swiped from under her feet again. After 2 years of building a solid reputation with her lifestyle column, she pestered her editor for a chance to do a feature. He'd given her that opportunity, and she'd blown it. Somehow, her story had leaked out to their number one competitor, Celeb Magazine, leaving her scrambling for a backup. For the first time ever, Celeb had sold more copies than Odopa, and it had been her fault. Hey, the voice of her colleague Dufie Swanika reeled her back from her momentary drift. Busy? Chantal sat back and sighed. I'm about to call his lordship. Dufie clutched her chest in a dramatic fashion. Oh, I can just feel your pain. I swear, Randy's just doing this to punish me for the celeb incident. Oh, come on, he's doing you a favor. Do you know how many writers would kill for an interview with Ghana's most eligible bachelor? A snort of laughter slipped past her lips. Most eligible bachelor, my ass. She winced. Maybe that was harsh. After all, she hadn't met the guy. Wasn't exactly his fault he looked like God's best work of creation, or that women didn't let him forget it, even if by some miracle he wanted to. She hummed, as if he's probably as shallow as he is good looking. Add that to his ego-boosting name, and she had one pain in the ass interview on her hands. You really have it in for this guy, don't you? Dufie chuckled. Listen, a group of us single ladies are going out for drinks tonight. Do you want to go? She became quiet. Her gaze flickered over the Cupid spin danglers hanging from the ceiling and the floral bouquets and greeting cards adorning the rich mahogany workspaces. All around them, the office hummed with Valentine's Day buzz and animated banter about romantic dates later in the evening. They all reminded her she'd been happy once, hopelessly in love. How had it all gone wrong? She shoved those thoughts aside, focusing her attention on her friend. No, I think I'll just go home and have a quiet evening. Dufie folded her arms, perching herself at the edge of the desk. Chantal, he's been gone 4 years. She didn't answer, and the ensuing silence stretched between them for a beat. I'm sorry for bringing it up. I know what you went through losing Martin so tragically, and then to find out, she stopped, as if realizing she'd gone off on a tangent. It's all right, Dufie, you can say it. The part that had cut her the deepest. He was with another woman. She released a jagged breath, stunned to discover those words hadn't been as hard to utter as she'd expected. The pain and anger still simmered somewhere inside, but for the first time, she didn't feel their weight crashing down on her. Maybe time did heal all wounds, or perhaps she'd finally perfected her ability to numb her heart.
Okay, we
Yeah.
can stop there.
Yeah.
And thanks for that reading. I haven't read Romans in such a long time, but picking up your book, I couldn't put it down. I think I told her I think I read 170
Yes,
pages
you
at a
did.
go. It was quite gripping, and I like the way you brought the reader into the story.
Thank you.
But like Chantel, I'm quite interested in the name Lord. Why that name?
I actually did know somebody called Lord, and I was wondering, why would you call your kid Lord? I mean, really, I would never date a guy with that name, because when you insult him, if you're a Christian and you insult a guy called Lord, it doesn't feel very nice. Yeah.
So why did you pick that as your key, one of the key
Okay,
characters in the book?
It's part of a series called Men of Distinction. And aside from being rich young men, 3 out of them have such names. So there's Lord, there's Adonis, there's Alpha, and then there's Jackson. So their names were supposed to be part of the distinction thing. Yes.
Okay, and speaking of distinction, that comes out clearly in the novel because Lord is from a wealthy family. He's a CEO of a construction company, doing very well, Ghanaian company, and and his friends as well, coming from very wealthy families. I felt that theme of class and love played into their relationship as well, particularly towards the end, where I don't want to reveal the end of the story, but there's something that happens, and obviously Lord's status and his position, his class position comes into play.
Right.
I was wondering what you were doing in terms of what you were trying to say in terms of how class shapes love, or how class or status or money or social standing shapes relationship in general.
This girl.
Or should
because that is actually more relevant in the second book. But with this one, yes, the status is there, but I wanted to show the humanity of the billionaire guy. We always think of rich people as them, and I wanted to show that underneath the money and everything, they are people. When they go home, they also hurt. They talk. They have a lot of the same family dynamics that we have. But then you add money and status, and it takes it to a different dimension. Yes, but money alone shouldn't be what keeps us apart.
Thank you. There are some writers probably in the audience as well. I'm a writer, and so I'll throw in a few questions about craft and writing process, just so that we writers can also benefit from this conversation. I was wondering how the opening came to you. Did you know from the start that you were going to start in Chantel's office, or is it something that you went back and forth on? And then tied into that, incorporating Valentine's Day and even the fact that they have, this is not giving anything away, it's in the blurb, but tying in the fact that they also have a one-night stand the first time they meet. Is that a starting point that you knew of right from the get-go when you sat down to write this book, or did you go back and forth? Did you tweak it? How did that opening come about?
Okay, so the story actually started from a scene. It was a writing competition, a Valentine's Day writing competition to write about a first kiss. So the first thing I wrote in this was the first kiss. And then after the competition, there was another one to write a novel for Harlequin. And it was Harlequin Desire, which features rich guys and that sort of thing. So I don't know if I sat down to think about how I was going to start it, but it was Valentine's Day. And I also wanted to start with a bang. So I figured in the office, at the point where she's about to make that call, is the best place to start.
And out of curiosity, what was this competition? Was it a local competition or?
No, it was held by Mills and Boone for that first kiss.
I guess taking a step back, as I said in my intro, this book was first published in 2012,
Yes.
and MP is releasing it again. When was it? When did it come out? 2021?
It originally came out in 2012, and after I got the rights back, I decided to add a few more scenes. It's at that point that I decided I was going to do a series. So there's a scene where we introduce the other guys, and that wasn't in the 2012 version of the story. And then it's also available for the first time in paperback. At first, it was just an ebook. Yes.
So what made you want to release it again?
Because the publisher I published with, they do ebook first, and depending on how it sells, they decide which books to go with the paperback. And you know, in Ghana, most of us, we still like the physical book. And so a lot of Ghanaians knew I had this book out, but they couldn't read the book, you know. A few people are able to purchase ebooks from Amazon, but it's not everyone. There's some discriminatory policy that they have. So it's not everyone in Ghana who can buy books on Amazon. Yeah, so then I decided, once I got the rights back, I decided I would release it myself, make it out in paperback so that I can have copies in Ghana.
I found Chantel to be quite a strong, independent woman, working woman. She has her own house even. How did you work that? How did you come about with that character? How did you piece together that character and make Chantel who she is?
I think Chantel is probably like a mix of people I worked with. At the time, I was in advertising. So the setting I pictured for her was the kind of office that we had at that time. Although we weren't 12 people, I think we were 5 in the office. And yeah, so a lot of us, well, I didn't have my own place, but there were a lot of my colleagues who had their own small place. You know, they were independent, and even when they were living at home, they probably had the boys' quarters. So there was some sense of semi-independence with that level of, you know, and I mean, she's in her late 20s, and to solidify it, I made her parents live in Cape Coast so that it's not very strange that, at least in the Ghanaian culture, to have a woman living on her own. It would raise questions if her parents lived in Accra. So all of that created Chantel's, you know, her economic level.
Okay, interesting. We sort of obviously structure the story to suit what we imagine the character to be. So I like the fact that you had her parents go live in Cape Coast, had them there. Shall we take a second reading? I feel like we've been chatting for a bit to give people a flavor of the novel.
Okay. So my original second reading was going to be a sex scene, but I see children in the in the audience. So I'm going to go with the first kiss, which was actually the first scene of this story. Give me a moment. Okay, so a little background. After the scene I read, she calls Lord, and then he tells, it's Valentine's Day, so he says, oh, I'm having a party at this nightclub, so why don't you come? And then after the party, you get your interview. So she goes there, and so this is what happens. Before she could comment, he said, "Let's dance. Will it get me my interview faster?" He gave her a one-sided smile, the hot and teasing kind. "Do I scare you that much?" She released a snort. "You don't scare me at all." Unless he meant the uncharacteristic lilt in her heartbeat each time he laughed, or the warmth coursing through her veins when he smiled, both of which indicated her defenses were useless against him. Nothing terrified her more. "If you aren't scared, why are you so eager to run?" So I'm going to skip a bit. He seemed amused by her lack of a response as he took her hand and led her to an open area in the lounge where a few couples already danced. The music turned slow. She hesitated. Slow music meant being in his arms, their bodies touching. She shouldn't do this. Yet, for some ridiculous reason, she needed even, the closeness, to feel like a woman again, just for a moment. Even if she must be certifiably insane for wanting all of this in the arms of Lord Mackenzie. He pulled her gently, bringing her body flush against his. A tremor rushed through her. His warm breath on her face sent tiny tingles running over her skin. Heat radiated to her from each part of his body touching hers, his powerful thighs, lean hips, and firm abdomen, his hand pressed firmly on the small of her back. When was the last time she'd been this close to a man? Her breath quickened as raw need surged through her. Far too long, not since Martin. Tears stung her eyes as the familiar loneliness accompanying Valentine's Day closed in. Old love songs always got to her. She turned away from his watchful gaze, focusing on other couples huddled close together on the dance floor. Yearning pierced her heart. She gave herself a mental shake. She couldn't entertain such thoughts. Once she did, there would be no salvation. As if sensing her distress, he pulled her closer, his hold tightening around her. Every thought flitted out of her mind as soon as their gazes locked, and she began to drown in the deep pools of his dark eyes. Happy Valentine's Day, Chantel. Was she stupid for liking the way he said her name? She opened her mouth to say something about how Valentine's Day had been commercialized to the point of triviality, an occasion for errant lovers to feel better about neglecting their significant others, a day to buy enough emotional credit for another year, one day to make the unloved feel even less loved, anything to hide the strain of hearing those words. But nothing came out. His face hovered just inches away. Her heart stutter-stepped. Her breath snagged. Without explanation, she wanted to know the taste of his lips. She wanted to erase it all from her mind, her pain, his reputation. She wanted to believe he really was just the most eligible bachelor in town, and he had her in his arms. He smiled, really smiled, not the movie star grins he'd been flashing earlier. His gaze emitted pure heat, wrapped around a hint of gravity. What in the world could make a man with his looks and popularity melancholic? Surely, Lord Mackenzie didn't have the same kinds of problems as mere mortals. His fingers feathered her cheek, sending another wave of tremors through her. When his hand reached her chin, he lifted her face. Her mind barely registered what was happening before the space between them vanished. His searing kiss scorched her inside out. Nothing in her repertoire came close. A soft moan escaped her throat before she could stop it. She melted into him, curling her fingers around his nape. When he pulled away, her breath came in fast, shallow bursts. In stunned reflex, her fingers came to her lips, which felt swollen, having not been used for this purpose in a while. Weak-kneed and aroused, she sensed she only remained standing because of his strong arms around her. One of the couples dancing bumped into them, jerking her back to reality. Shoot! This evening would be more difficult than she could have guessed. How was she supposed to conduct a professional interview when she had just kissed the interviewee, and now her mind insisted on dancing around words like ravished? So I'll end there.
Thank you for that. I'll just ask a few more questions, but in the meantime, if you have any questions to ask MP, just let me know. There's a facilitator back there who draw my attention to the fact that you want to ask her a question. I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about Lord to help the audience get a better sense of the characters, because he's sort of the typical romance novel, tall, handsome, rich. But there's also some kind of complexity to him in terms of even when Chantel thinks that surely Lord Mackenzie didn't have the same kind of problems as mere mortals. The fact that there's some kind of vulnerability and softness in him, I felt in reading the novel. Can you tell us about how you worked at developing such a sort of not one-sided character, but multifaceted?
Okay, so Lord is probably also a mixture of people. He's not exactly modeled after this person I will mention, but I remember this meeting with this person. Okay, so when I was much younger, I was interning at a company, an agency, and I was asked to deliver something to Joy FM. Yes, Joy FM. And then, so I went there. I was supposed to deliver it to Komla Dumo of blessed memory. And he came out and he was like this really tall guy. And I was like, so I think the being tall, and I also gave him the background that he used to be in the media. So that's also Komla Dumo. And he made the morning show the #1 show. So all of that is him. And then a few other things from various people blended to make that, to form his character. So that's what I would say. Was there any other aspect of the question?
No, yeah, I think you got at that. And in terms of his vulnerability and his, why is he? Okay. So he's described as a playboy, but then we see in the novel that he can, in terms of his interaction with Chantel, and again, this is not, I don't think this is a spoiler, but even before meeting Chantel, he had read her column for the past 3, is that a spoiler?
No, well, not really. Now that you mentioned it, I should probably have read that for the second reading.
Okay, yeah. So a bit of backstory. Lord Adonis in the novel has actually been interested in Chantel for a while. He came across one, I don't know, I can't remember how exactly he came across the magazine, but he's been reading her column in the magazine for a while, and through that, he sort of starts falling in love with her, in a sense, even before meeting Chantel in person. So there's this idea that it's almost like he started falling in love with her intellectual side, even before meeting the Chantel in person and being attracted strongly to her. So I just thought that was quite interesting in terms of contrasting the playboy image with this sort of person who can be drawn to someone's intellectual side or seek someone's intellectual side even before meeting them. And I think thrown in there as well, so I saw some vulnerability or softness in there, but also I don't know if I saw some obsessiveness there, because he had been reading her column for like 3 years before meeting her or arranging to meet her, in a sense. He works with the editor of the magazine to come up with a reason for them to meet, which is for her to do an interview of him. So I was wondering if there was some obsessiveness there as well, slightly stalkerish, reading the person's column for 3 years before figuring out a way to meet them. I was just wondering.
Well, I suppose there's a bit of that, but for a guy with means, I mean, 3 years is a long time, and I think he bided his time, made sure that his initial perception of this person was what he thought. Well, I guess on the surface you can think that, but then you have to go into the details of how he approached getting to know her, getting to set up the meeting and everything. And even after their first meeting, how he went about getting her to trust him. So, yeah, well, I didn't think of it as stalkerish.
But I guess then that's where the vulnerability comes in, because he I guess maybe he doesn't want to open himself up to being, I don't know, disappointed or heartbroken or whatever. So yeah, he took his time. But I guess in that process as well, it gets to that bit of the fact that it takes a while for love to mature. So following her through her words and getting to know her first through her words, maybe. I was wondering, I should also mention,
Okay.
I'll just mention that there are books. MP will be, at the end of our conversation, MP will be doing a book signing, and there are books for sale, but we are also going to do a little prize draw, but I'll let you know when that will be. And there's also drinks. There are also drinks. So if it's an informal thing, so if you feel like getting some wine, please feel free to get some wine from the table.
There's both alcoholic and non-alcoholic. So
Good.
Yeah.
She thought of everyone, this woman. Okay, so I was wondering if we could get to a key theme. I think the child that was here is gone, so we can a key theme of the novel, which is about lust, love, attraction, sexuality, being open to sexual expression. And I found Chantel to be very vocal, liberal in terms of her sexuality, even having that one-night stand, making that comment that, it's been a while, right? So she has to get some, right? And acknowledging that she's very much attracted to this man. And even at some point in the novel, when they finally try and make it work, at some point he decides, okay, I'm just going to give her time. I will not get physical. But at some point she asks him directly, are you going to make love to me? So I was just wondering if you could talk about how, as a romance novelist, you work that into the story. And I found that MP, even in her writing, it didn't, when you have to write a sex scene, it could get sleazy. But I found that in your writing, it wasn't sleazy. It wasn't like watching a pornographic movie. It wasn't like dirty, but it was sweet. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how a romance novelist, you work in that sexuality, the sexuality of your...
Okay. So for me, the sex scenes, yes, they are fully described, but the point of the sex scene is not the sex. The point of the sex scene is to advance the relationship. So I talk about their emotion. Even though they are doing it, you see what he or she is thinking and all that. And I've said this before to other people. I write sex scenes in a way I wouldn't mind if my mother read my stories. So basically that's it. I write it in a way that I feel is sensitive to our Ghanaian sensibilities, and but we know that sex happens. So I want to people to read it and feel the emotion and not just feel like, okay, and so he did this and he put it there, and so that's where I come from when I'm writing a sex scene.
That's good, because I think that's part of the reason why I enjoy the book, because it wasn't so out. Well, when you read the scenes, yeah, it's clear they are having sex, but it wasn't. It was done in a mature way, and yeah, I didn't actually. I think if I were to reread this, I would pay more attention to the fact that you were highlighting their emotions rather than just purely the actions, but also highlighting their emotions. So thanks for that. And then what about Chantel in terms of her being vocal, liberal, in terms of expressing, telling him, that, I want it, expressing that need, that sexual need?
Well, so I think that's highlighting what things should be if you are in a loving relationship. If as a woman, if you're in a loving relationship where there's trust, well, my experience is that you're not afraid to tell the man that you want him today, or you're not waiting for him to make the move, or you're not dropping hints for him to get the idea that, oh, okay, this must be what she's looking for. So in a sense, I wanted to create a character who, even though there's that good girlish thing about her, to say that just because you're a good girl doesn't mean you can't ask for sex, if you are in a relationship or not.
Thanks. Do we have any questions from the audience so far? Anyone who wants to ask a question? No, not yet. Okay. So then I'll keep asking my questions.
Okay.
So I thought, back when I was a teenager, I read a lot of romance novels. My mom is here, so she's learning this, but she probably already knew. I read a lot of romance novels, and I think one thing I noticed was there's sort of like a typical structure. There's some kind of, boy meets girl, there's some kind of attraction, but then there's some kind of thing that is keeping them away or apart. In this particular instance, Chantel and her baggage and this internal conflict, even though it's clear that she's very much attracted to Lord. Okay. Even though she's very much attracted to Lord, and then they were sort of find out, and then Lord also has he wants to get into something, with her from the get-go, but she's resisting. So there seems to be this typical structure where there's some kind of, they meet, there's some kind of conflict, they can't be together, or they don't want to be together, then they end up together. Everything is good, they end up together, then there's another sort of conflict that brings them apart, and then it's all resolved in the end. I was wondering if whether your novels tend to follow that structure, whether you play around with that sort of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you are the romance novelist, whether you play around with that sort of structure at all in your writing.
Okay, the short answer is yes. First of all,
there's that
structure. It doesn't always happen in the same order, but as I mentioned before, this story was originally written for Mills and Boon. So there definitely has to be that structure. They meet, there's a black moment, and all of that. That's what sort of informed the original structure of the story. But of course, after that competition, a few things have changed in it. But yes, a romance novel is defined as a novel that is primarily about a romantic relationship that has a happy ending. So if it doesn't have a happy ending, it's not a romance novel. We're not saying that it's not a love story. We're not saying that we shouldn't write tragic love stories, but if it doesn't have a happy ending, it's not a romance novel. So yes, and the thing is that there's so much tragedy in the world, and so many bad things happening that at some point I decided that I would write this. Romance novel readers like the guarantee of either happily ever after or what we call happy for now. So even though it doesn't end, it may not end with a proposal, but it should end with some sort of promise that they are going steady. So at the end of the novel, we know that, well, they are dating, long term. Whether or not it will end in marriage at some point, the reader can fill in the blanks. But yes, there's I think with my novels, there's always a bit of that structure, but not necessarily in that order all the time.
Thank you, MP. Thank you. I'd like to invite Mrs. Celestine Nudanu up on stage to share her impressions of the novel. Hello, Mrs. Celestine.
From here, the thing fell down from here. Sorry. I'm worth it.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. Mrs. Nudanu is a freelance editor, a poet, and the senior assistant registrar at the University of Professional Studies. Thank you for joining us, and please, may we have your impressions of the novel?
Yeah. Thank you, and sorry to be late. I'm happy to be here, actually. I must say, I read the first edition of the MEB, Most Eligible Bachelor. That was in 2012, I think. So my review, and I've read the new one as well, so my impressions. I read MEB, for short, by Empi Baryeh when it first came out in 2012, and also after the release in 2020. And my, oh my, once I started, I couldn't stop. Let me start with the main characters. Lord Mackenzie, and the name. Lord Mackenzie, a sinfully handsome construction tycoon, managing the family business with a reputation of a Casanova, and Chantel Sarr, a beautiful features writer with a society magazine, Odopa. On a personal front, Chantel is scarred from a past relationship. A fiancé who had lied and cheated on her, so she's not interested in starting a new relationship, especially not with a playboy. The story starts on Valentine's Day, and we meet Chantel, who must interview Ghana's most eligible bachelor for her magazine. She's not looking forward to it because she sees him as an arrogant and privileged man. Meanwhile, we learn that Lord may have ulterior motives for accepting to do this interview. When they meet, Lord is as overconfident as she expected, but there's also something very genuine about him that makes her let down her guard. I really loved Lord and Chantel. They have this raw chemistry, and the unbridled passion between them left me excited and breathless. Empi Baryeh is one of the first published, if not the first Ghanaian female published romance writer I know of. She has broken through the myths surrounding romance and sex by coming out with a novel that freely highlights the relationship between a man and a woman in love who are not afraid to explore their attraction to each other and their sexuality in vivid imagery. However, Empi's description of the sex scene in the novel is done in tasteful yet simple language that is not offensive to the reader, and her sensitivity to the Ghanaian culture is commendable. At the same time, she manages to create hot and tantalizing scenes that have the reader gasping for more, just like her protagonists. I fell in love with Lord myself and wish I had been Chantal, if only if only to be the recipient of such tender touches and kisses. The sentence structure The sentence structure of the novel is simple and yet rich, full of camaraderie among the characters as depicted in the dialogue between Chantal and her office colleagues, and the special relationship between her and her twin sister Danielle. There's also a scene where Lord invites Chantal to lunch at his parents, and we also see the dynamics of the Mackenzie family. Again, Empi's use of real-life scenes and settings in the novel makes the story believable. The reader is transported through time and space to familiar sites in Ghana, following Lord and Chantal, a construction site in Dodowa, an event at National Theatre, a trip to Adanfor, to name a few. I think Empi has done a great job, though I had one problem with the story. During one of the sex scenes, the condom breaks. These days, condoms hardly ever break. I felt it was more plausible for Lord Mackenzie to be overtaken by his passion for Chantal and make love to her without protection. However, one could argue that in this day of HIVs and STIs, it would be more prudent for Lord to use protection and break it in his haste, thereby risking making Chantal pregnant, than not to use it at all and sending an...
With the same names, if you could write, let's say you have a name like Kofi, you can write Kofi A, or add your surname actually maybe, so then we can tell which Kofi it is. Everyone has to take a card. No, he has. So please write your name on the card. Be sure to add your surname if you have a name like Kofi or Kwame or Kweku. And then when you're done writing your name, please just wave, and then Our Lady will come around and collect it. Thank you. And please, just a reminder that we have drinks. They have to be drunk. So please feel free, as the rain starts, to get yourself a drink. So if we have all the cards, anyone who hasn't handed in their card, MP will be doing the draw for us shortly. In the meantime, MP, can you tell us where your books are available? apart from Most Eligible Bachelor, if we want to read any of your other books, where can we find them?
Okay, so all my books are available in ebook format. So those who do prefer ebooks, you can get them from Amazon or anywhere else you buy your books. Two of them are available in audiobook. So those who also like audiobooks, Chancing Faith and His Inherited Princess are also available on Audible. In Ghana, you can get copies of most of my books from GAO, Ghana Association of Writers Office. And on booknook.store, you order it and then they deliver the book to you. A couple of my books are also available at EPP, the Legon branch. And then, of course, if you contact me, you can also get a copy from me directly.
Please, part of this literary festival is to help us connect readers to writers. So please support MP, get a copy of her book, read some more of her work, please. We need to support Ghanaian literature and Ghanaian writers. Okay, so drum roll.
Okay, so while we are waiting for that, a couple of announcements. I have a newsletter that I send once a month-ish, and the latest copy is, I printed some and there are copies on the table there, so if you are interested, you can just pick a copy, and then there's a link on the page where you can go online and look at it electronically, sign up for the newsletter if you are interested in receiving the future editions. Okay, so and the winner of a free signed copy of Most Eligible Bachelor is Jeffrey. Jeffrey, who's Jeffrey?
Oh, Jeffrey.
Oh, okay.
Well done, Jeffrey.
Okay,
Will you give it to him? Are you going to sign it down for him?
Well, I'll sign it after.
She signed it after. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank
I
you.
hope you enjoy it. Please leave a review or, my contact is in the book, so let me know your thoughts when you read it.
Okay, thank you so much for coming. As we said, MP will now be spending the next sort of 5 minutes before the next session doing selling more of her books and also doing a signing. There are also drinks, so please help yourself. And thank you again for coming.
Thank you. Yeah. The price for today is 70 cedis. After today, it goes up. So if you really want a copy of the book, buy it now. Thank you. Thanks for coming.